Nobody wanted giant virgin bride until the rancher's little girl asked, "Can you be my mama?" Witness this unbelievable, true, inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The town of Willow Creek, Montana, had a way of remembering things. It remembered who was born where, who married whom, and who left without ever coming back. But it also remembered those who didn't quite fit in, and for Clara Jennings, that memory lingered heavy. From her teenage years, she stood taller than most boys her age, her shoulders broader, her frame strong and commanding, yet her spirit quiet and shy. Townsfolk, with their cruel habit of gossip, began to call her the giant girl. As years passed and suitors came and went for others, the whispers grew louder. She became the giant virgin bride, the woman no man seemed to want. Clara never asked for much. She worked hard on her parents' small farm, mending fences, ploughing fields, carrying heavy buckets of water, while other young women spent their evenings at dances or courting on the porch. Her hands were rough with calluses, her dresses plain, and her face always hidden under the shadow of a straw hat. Yet there was a softness in her, an unspoken kindness that revealed itself in the way she fed stray dogs behind the general store or left baskets of apples on old Mrs. Hargrove's porch without ever knocking. She had love in her heart, but no place to pour it. Years went by, and the town grew accustomed to seeing Clara as she was, alone. Men who were desperate for wives often traveled to neighboring towns to find women rather than consider her. Mothers warned their sons with cruel chuckles, "Don't let the giant get you." By 26, Clara had quietly accepted her fate. She would live her life unmarried, tending the land, caring for her aging parents and fading into the background. Yet fate has its way of bending paths that seem already carved. In the heart of Willow Creek, Luke Turner worked his sprawling cattle ranch with grit and silence. A man in his early 30s, his reputation was built on honesty, hard labor, and the kind of rugged strength that made him respected in town. But beneath his stoic presence was a wound that never healed. 2 years earlier, Luke had lost his wife, Anna, to pneumonia that swept through the valley. She left behind not just a grieving husband, but also a little girl, Emma, only 3 at the time. Emma was Luke's world. He rose with the sun to tend the cattle, but before the chores were done, he always tied her small boots, braided her hair the way Anna once did, and carried her on his shoulders across the fields. Still, the absence of a mother weighed heavily. The ranch house felt empty, its silence echoing through Emma's young heart. She missed lullabies, warm embraces, and the gentle guidance only a mother could give. Luke did his best, but a child knows when something vital is missing. It was on a Sunday afternoon when paths that had never crossed meaningfully before suddenly intertwined. After church, Clara carried a basket of bread, as she often did, offering it quietly to families on her way home. She kept her eyes low, her steps steady, and tried not to notice the looks people gave her. When she reached the Turner Ranch gate, she spotted little Emma sitting on the porch steps, her legs too short to touch the ground, swinging in the air. Emma's big blue eyes widened as she saw the towering woman approach. There was no fear in her gaze, only curiosity. Clara paused, unsure if she should continue, but before she could decide, Emma trotted toward her, her tiny boots kicking up dust. She looked up, craning her neck, and asked with the honesty only a child could muster, "Can you be my mama?" The words struck like lightning in the quiet air. Clara froze, her heart thundering in her chest. She had never been asked for anything like that, never been wanted in that way. Luke, stepping out from the porch, stood stunned. He opened his mouth to apologize, to explain his daughter's innocence, but the words tangled on his tongue. He saw the way Clara's face shifted, shock, then pain, then something softer he couldn't name. Clara knelt, her tall frame folding gracefully, so her eyes met Emma's. The little girl's hands clutched her skirt, and Clara, with trembling fingers, brushed a stray curl from her cheek. No words came, only a smile so fragile it seemed it might shatter. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't mocking her, rejecting her, or whispering behind her back. A child, a pure, unguarded soul, was asking her to step into the role she had always secretly longed for, but never dared to dream possible. Luke cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Emma, honey," he said gently, "Miss Jennings just came by to bring bread. She's not—" But Clara, still kneeling, glanced up with teary eyes, and he stopped. Something in her expression silenced him. The days that followed should have been ordinary, but they weren't. Emma, with her childlike determination, began inviting Clara back. "Come see my horse," she said one morning. "Come braid my doll's hair," she asked another afternoon. Clara, at first hesitant, found herself unable to refuse. Each visit pulled her deeper into a world she never thought she would enter. She cooked soup one evening when Luke was late in the fields. She mended a torn dress for Emma when she tripped running through the barn. She even sang softly to Emma at night when the little girl begged her not to leave too soon. The town noticed. Whispers once cruel began to turn curious. "Have you seen Clara at the Turner place?" The women murmured in the general store. "She's with the child near every day now." Men shook their heads, muttering about how odd it seemed. Yet even they couldn't deny the change in Luke. The once grief-stricken rancher now had a spark in his eyes again, the kind that comes from hope, from seeing life return to a home long haunted by silence. Clara herself felt the shift inside her. For years, she had believed the world when it said she was unwanted. Yet here was a child clinging to her hand, calling her mama without hesitation. It healed wounds she didn't realize had cut so deep. She found herself laughing, truly laughing, when Emma splashed mud on her dress or tried to feed sugar cubes to the old mare. The loneliness that had been her shadow seemed to shrink in the light of Emma's innocent love. Luke, too, began to see Clara differently. He had known her as the quiet farm girl on the edge of town, but in the presence of his daughter, she transformed. He saw her patience, her gentleness, the way her tall frame bent low to tie Emma's shoes, the way her rough hands smoothed out wrinkled sheets with surprising tenderness. One evening, as he watched from the doorway, he realized with startling clarity that Emma wasn't the only one who needed Clara. He did too, but Luke was cautious. He carried the weight of his late wife's memory, and the thought of offering his heart again felt like betrayal. Clara, for her part, still believed herself unworthy, haunted by years of ridicule. And yet beneath all those fears, something undeniable was growing. A bond born not of appearances, but of need, kindness, and love in its purest form. That first question, "Can you be my mama?" was no longer just a child's innocent slip. It had become a seed planted deep, taking root in three hearts bound together by loss, loneliness, and the unexpected chance of family. The days at the Turner Ranch stretched into weeks, and what began as innocent visits slowly wove themselves into a rhythm that felt almost natural. Clara found herself waking earlier, her chores at home completed with unusual speed, her steps leading her toward Luke's ranch as though pulled by an invisible thread. Emma waited eagerly every time, her little hands clapping with excitement the moment Clara appeared at the gate. What had started as curiosity had turned into a bond that grew stronger with every passing day. Clara was not blind to the town's whispers. She heard them at the market, felt their stares when she passed by, noticed how conversations hushed when she entered a room. Some people believed her sudden closeness with Luke and Emma was unnatural, others said it was desperation, and some, though quietly, admitted it was perhaps fate. Yet for the first time in her life, Clara didn't allow the gossip to weigh her down. Emma's laughter filled the hollow corners of her heart, and Luke's quiet nods of appreciation were worth more than 1,000 cruel words. Luke, however, wrestled with his own battle. He had been raised to stand firm, to work hard, and to bury his emotions beneath layers of responsibility. For years after Anna's death, he had lived like a man carrying a stone in his chest, heavy and immovable. Clara's presence disrupted that heaviness. He noticed the warmth she brought to Emma's smile, the gentle order she restored to his household, and the peace that filled the air when she hummed softly while preparing supper. Yet he feared that speaking of it, acknowledging it, would shatter the delicate balance they had created. One evening in late summer, after a long day of rounding up cattle, Luke returned home to find Clara and Emma sitting by the porch with a lantern glowing between them. Emma had fallen asleep against Clara's shoulder, her small arms curled around a rag doll, while Clara herself sat humming softly, rocking ever so slightly to soothe the child. The sight struck Luke like nothing else before. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine it. Clara as his wife, Emma's mother, their home alive with warmth and stability again. But just as quickly, he pushed the thought away, gripping the railing with calloused hands. He could not rush into something that carried the weight of both his past and Emma's future. Clara, too, wrestled with feelings she dared not voice. She had never been wanted, never been courted, never held the gaze of a man who saw her as more than the subject of gossip. Yet Luke's eyes lingered on her now in ways that made her breath catch. Still, she told herself it was impossible. She was plain, too tall, too different. He was respected, admired, and had once loved a woman who seemed her opposite in every way. How could she ever believe she might be enough? It was Emma, innocent and fearless, who continued to build the bridge between them. "Mama Clara," she began to call her one morning, the name spilling from her lips as though it had always belonged there. Clara corrected her gently, cheeks burning, but the little girl only laughed. Luke heard it too, the name ringing in his ears, stirring emotions he could no longer ignore. As the weeks turned into autumn, the Turner Ranch flourished in ways that surprised even Luke. With Clara's help, meals were hearty and shared around a table that no longer felt empty. The house was tidy, the atmosphere lighter, and Emma's giggles echoed through the halls once more. Neighbors who once whispered began to soften their tones, some even offering nods of approval when they passed Luke in town. They could see what he already knew, that Clara had become an inseparable part of their lives. Still, doubts lingered. One evening, Luke invited Clara to sit with him after Emma had gone to bed. The air was cool. The stars stretched across the Montana sky like endless diamonds. He turned to her, his voice low but steady. "Clara, I need to thank you. For Emma, for everything you've done. This ranch hasn't felt like a home in a long time, and you've given us that again." Clara's hands twisted nervously in her lap. "You don't need to thank me, Luke. Emma asked me to be here, and truth be told, I needed it as much as she did." Luke studied her, the lamplight casting soft shadows across her face. There was strength in her, but also vulnerability. "You've been more than I ever expected, more than I deserve." He paused, the words on his tongue heavier than any burden he had carried before. "But I worry. People talk, and I don't want you to get hurt because of us, because of me." Clara swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "I've been hurt by people's words all my life, but for the first time I feel like I belong somewhere. With Emma, with you. If that means more whispers, then let them talk." The silence that followed was not heavy, but tender, filled with unspoken truths that both feared to admit too soon. Luke reached out almost hesitantly, his rough hand brushing against hers. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to hold on, and in that quiet touch, years of loneliness melted away. But life has a way of testing what the heart desires most. One chilly morning, Clara arrived at the ranch to find Luke's sister Margaret waiting on the porch. Margaret was a stern woman, sharp-tongued and fiercely protective of her brother's reputation. She wasted no time in confronting Clara. "You think people don't see what you're doing? My brother is a respected man, and well, you've always been the town's outcast. Don't fool yourself into thinking you belong here. Emma may be too young to know better, but the rest of us see it plain. Leave before you embarrass yourself further." The words stung deeper than Clara expected. Old wounds tore open, and the certainty she had begun to build wavered. That evening, she avoided Luke's gaze, her visits becoming less frequent. Emma cried when Clara didn't come, her little heart unable to understand the complexities of adult fear. Luke noticed confusion and frustration rising within him. until one night he found Clara walking away from the ranch, tears streaming silently down her face. "Clara!" he called, striding after her. "What's going on? Why are you pulling away?" She shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. "Your sister's right. I don't belong here. I never have."